Hello, everyone. This is so exciting. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and X. And I'm here with Laura Greenwood, a really good friend of mine and incredible inspiration in my life. You'll find out how and why soon. But first of all, I just wanted to introduce myself and my conversation. I guess if we're in this conversation, I guess if you're connected with me on LinkedIn or you're following Learning Pioneers on YouTube, you know a little bit about me. But just in case, I'm Becky Carlson. I co-run two learning communities called Learning Pioneers and Press Play. They both focus on what I would say what matters in education, play being one thing, developing learning to learn being another, connecting with international educators being another, this conversation being another, which I will introduce in a moment and we'll dig into a little bit more in a second. But I want to hand over to Laura and say hi to Laura. And Laura, would you just like to introduce yourself and say a little bit about you and your work?
Of course. Hello, everybody. This is my first live StreamYard, so I'm trying to contain my excitement. So just to start with, as you can see from the screen, I'm guessing, so I'm Laura Greenwood, and my background is I have 18 years, I cannot quite believe it, in mental health. And I'm an accredited psychotherapist, the founder and clinical lead of a specialist psychotherapy and wellbeing clinic for parents, children, and families. And I suppose a big part of my work now, which I suppose leads us into the conversation that we're having today, is being an advocate and a speaker for changing the way we support and value parents within our society for the greater good of them, for the greater good of their children, and for the greater good of society. And I believe that this is how we break generational patterns that don't work for us. They didn't work for those that came before us, and they certainly wouldn't work for those that come after us. And a lot of the parents that come to see us within the clinic, often they come because they want to change patterns, not really for themselves, but actually for their children. They often don't want to pass on certain habits or patterns to their children, but they have absolutely no idea how to do it. And then what they discover through the work that we do, that a lot of that starts with them. And I know that's going to be a really important part of our conversation today. But it's probably also worth mentioning, as well as, you know, all of the roles that I play. I'm a mum myself too, to a near 7-year-old called Erin. And gosh, Erin is both my greatest challenge and my greatest gift. And I suppose I wouldn't be sat here today doing this work if it wasn't for him. And I'm so incredibly grateful to him for that. And I learn so much from him every single day. And I think we forget to see that or mention that or acknowledge that sometimes, that, you know, we're here as parents and educators, and we are teaching our children so much, yes. And this is what we're wanting to do in terms of breaking some of those generational patterns. But also, it's so important to recognise our children actually teach us so much too. And I just love that. I love that about my work, and I love that about being a mum, and I love that about being a human, to be honest, because I feel like through him and through my work, I just grow and learn every single day. And it just makes my life absolutely beautiful every day as a result.
Laura, you're such an inspiration. Just before going on to this call, almost immediately I'm like, I've got other stuff to ask Laura now. So I'll come to that in a second, but I just want to celebrate. We've got Job, Sadia, and Angelica all here on LinkedIn, and they are all incredible educators and parents. I'm not sure if all of you are parents, but I know some of you are, and very aligned with this conversation. So Job, Sadia, and Angelica, please join in. And as you're listening, share your thoughts, share your questions, because we're seeing it all and we will respond to them. And I was just wondering, okay, so first thing I'm going to pick up on before I actually even introduce what we're talking about, Laura, you were sharing that children are also here to teach us as much as we are here to learn from them. And as an early years teacher, I always thought that, and I always wondered, what if children are here to teach us perhaps even more than the other way around, because the education system isn't necessarily set up for that kind of connection, knowing, wonderment alongside children. So that's even just before we dive in, one potential shift we could play around with. What if children are here to teach us as much as, or if not more than, we're here to teach them? And I'd love people to share in the chat if they're either watching back or live with us now. And Carla's here. This is just such an amazing group of people. Welcome, Carla. What have you learned from children as a teacher, as a parent, that you didn't know before? What have they taught you? Oh my God, I've got so many things I could say to that. Shall I introduce what we're talking about a bit more, Laura?
Yeah, do it. But such a great question. Such a great question, you know, and I just love how you inspire that within people, that ability to stop, to reflect, to consider. But yes, please introduce what we're talking about.
It's going to be such a good conversation. So, yes, so we've titled this On the Same Team because I don't think anyone can disagree with it. But if parents and teachers and children are aligned and on the same team, we can make the hugest difference to ourselves, to our own learning and our own growth, to one another and to the children in our care. So why not be super intentional about that? Why not really unpick and reflect on what is it that makes teacher-parent relationships and collaborations really strong? What gets in the way? And what kinds of things can we do and put in place that will make a big difference? And I will just say, I think we have way more agency than we're taught in these things. So actually, if we just take the time to think and reflect and think, what does this mean for me? What could I do about this? We can come up with a plethora of ideas and things together. So that's what this invitation is. It's Laura and I discussing, and everyone who's here joining in and reflecting, how can we make this parent-teacher collaboration really nurturing, I'm going to throw out a bunch of words, inspiring, collaborative, clear. Laura, you often talk about perfect, clear communication so that there's no like misunderstandings and all like, or kind of judgment, you know, empathy, empathetic, all of those wonderful things, loving. Have you got some more words you'd add in there, Laura? Just picking them out on the top of my head.
Dynamic, yes. Evolving, moving. I was thinking about this earlier, like good communication is like a dance, you know? Do you not think that? Like really good communication, I always say it takes two to tango. And the idea is that we move in sync together, but occasionally there's friction. Somebody takes a wrong move, and that can cause a little bit of a rift. And so the idea is that we want to get back together in that dynamic, in that movement. But actually, for me, it's about recognizing that this takes two, or whoever's in that team, that dynamic in some way, that we've all got to take responsibility for our part to play within that.
Oh, brilliant point to end on there about taking that responsibility. And there's a little bit, we'll come into this a bit more, but I think with anything and everything, what's the cost if we don't do something, and what are the benefits if we do? And Jobs just shared in the chat here about his children, and I'm guessing it's your son, Job, but as well probably the children that you are teaching teach you curiosity and wonder over the most mundane things. That is so true, isn't it? Oh, you're making me miss early years now. Yeah.
That wonder, that joy, that like belly laugh, it's just something else to be able to kind of be in the experience of witnessing that and kind of feeling that with them too. It is just like, yeah, just such a beautiful experience.
And we might dig into this a little bit more, I'm sure we will, but we can embody that too. We're going to look at therapy and kind of self-work, but tapping into our inner child is all about embodying curiosity, wonder, play, because that's what we did as kids, and it's still in us, and we can still be that, and we can still embody that. So there's that lovely, so this is just an invite as well. There's that lovely question you often get asked in therapeutic work that, what did you love doing as a child? And can you create more of that in your life? So, just an invitation there. Craig, I'm going to look. Craig is another awesome educator. So everyone who's in the chat, make sure you're all connected with one another because you're all amazing. So Craig, do children teach us something to do? So do children teach us something, or do they help us remember how we used to be? Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah,
They do that.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
it's a mirror. They're a mirror, aren't they? They're a mirror. They're a mirror to so many different things, and some things that we don't particularly want them to mirror back to us as well. It's not always nice what they mirror back to us.
Yeah. So perfect point there to kind of segue into the first thing we were going to discuss, which is why relationships and why we feel this conversation is so important, and particularly why relationships. So we're talking particularly about parent-teacher relationships, but it's also parent-child relationships, teacher-child relationships, and even coming back from the very beginning point of that, our relationship with ourselves. So why do you think that's important, Laura? And everyone in the chat, share also why you think that's important.
Yeah, so obviously as human beings, we're social creatures who thrive on connection, actually. And so relationships are such a vital part of our existence, to the point where actually I find it incredibly bonkers that we don't actually teach or look at effective communication, starting, building, sustaining relationships in our mainstream curriculum, because this is something that we all know we are going to have to engage in within our life. I mean, we do it from the moment that we're born, from the interactions that we have, whether it be physically or kind of through eye contact with the people that surround us. And whilst it almost seems so obvious that they're really important to us, and yet I don't believe enough importance is placed on the value of how do we intentionally build relationships that support us and enrich our life, because that's what it's about. If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think love, connection, belonging is like the third one up. We've almost got to have our basic needs met before then further up that hierarchy we go. Relationships are about supporting us to thrive. As children, we need our main caregivers to take care of some of those basic needs for us, but actually what supports us past surviving, thriving, is relationships. So it's vital. Otherwise, all our life is about surviving. And I don't know about you, Becky, but I certainly want more from my life than surviving. I want to love it. I want to feel connected to the people around us. But also the reason why it's super important in terms of thinking about the relationship we have with ourselves is I actually don't think it is possible to connect with and have effective relationships, healthy relationships, dynamics with other people if we're not connected to ourselves. So we must connect to ourselves first. And actually, many adults are not connected to themselves, because they've been taught through their life not to disconnect from themselves, to look outside of themselves for answers. And what this is doing is it's meaning so many of us are walking around within our life. People almost call it like that, like they're kind of putting one foot in the other. They're living their life, but it feels very much in autopilot. They're disconnected. They're surrounded by people, but feeling completely lonely and disconnected. So and those people are unhappy. Often these people sit with me in my clinic and they say, I've got loads of people I surround myself with. So, in inverted commas, I've got plenty of relationships, but I feel totally disconnected from them. So relationship building, intentionality within that, and connection within that, and communication, I think is vital for people moving from survival to thriving.
Yeah, 100%, Laura. And so my next question is going to be, how do we reconnect to ourselves? But I'm going to come to that in a second, because I'm just going to come back to that point I made in the beginning of what's the danger if we don't, what's the cost if we don't, and what are the benefits if we do. And what you were describing there, I'm sure many people can relate to. I wouldn't be surprised if people were watching this or watch back on this and thought, oh my goodness, that's me. So I just want to plant self-compassion as a piece within this, because as we start to walk on a journey of introspection and self-reflection and relationship with ourselves, we both know you discover things about yourself or things that have gone on in your life that you're like, that really hurts. It can be really painful to look at those parts of ourselves. It can be a painful process to reconnect with ourselves. I think Jung says, you know what a fan I am of Jung, and I'm currently in Jungian therapy. He says there's no coming to consciousness without pain. There's no reconnecting to ourselves and our true selves without facing the things that have disconnected us from self, which will have been painful. So that's a big rock. We talk about in Learning Pioneers a lot. What are the rocks in the way? Yet, if we don't do that, we run the risk, if we don't attend to those things, we run the risk of, and we will, this is what's going to happen, we're going to model to everyone around us, including children, this is how we operate in life, from a space of disconnection. The benefits, when we start to connect and reconnect to ourselves and build a relationship with ourselves, are infinite. And I know that many people in the chat who kind of engage with my posts in LinkedIn and know that I share a lot of kind of self-reflective, therapeutic style healing journey posts are on that journey and will feel those benefits as you go. But it's a crazy journey. It's not smooth. So just some thoughts on that, Laura, from a perspective of a therapist, because you must see all of this when working with parents. And how can we begin to gently, compassionately, lovingly reconnect with ourselves and build that relationship?
Such an important point, Becky, because you're absolutely right. So many people are very disconnected from themselves, and the reasons why they are is because it is scary to connect with themselves. And it might be because they have been likely at some point within their life, it's not okay, it's not safe to connect with yourself. It's not okay to be your true self. You are not good enough, lovable enough, worthy enough of all of those things that you need if you step into, connect with, and live your life as your true self. They've learned from a safety perspective to switch all of that off, to focus outward and not inward. And then over time, that becomes a habit and the norm. And yes, you're disconnected from yourself. You're living a life in autopilot, doing the things that you think that you should be doing, living the life that you've been told by society, significant others, are the things that should make you happy, yet often you're not. And I suppose that is often what people find is, I feel like so many people say to me, I should be happy. I've got the house, I've got the husband, I've got the wife, I've got the kids. I have everything that I thought I should ever want, and still, I'm deeply unhappy, because they're completely disconnected from themselves. But it's just not as simple as, well, just start connecting with yourself. Just start thinking about what it is that you feel, what you need, go into therapy. Let's talk about this. Because actually coming face to face with yourself, sitting with yourself, is incredibly scary. And people, so some of the things that people often say is, I'm worried if I sit with myself and sit with that experience that kind of I've kind of avoided dealing with for a very long time, I will start crying. I will never stop. I'm a mum. I'm a teacher. I have got SHIT to do. I haven't got time to lose myself in healing. I haven't got time to do that. And so what they do is they do what they've always done. They keep going one foot in front of the other, because as painful as that is, and as much as they're not happy, there's almost comfort in knowing what they know. So I really deeply want to say, I know a lot, we're going to talk about so many things today, about things that might help in terms of connecting back with yourself, some of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of effective communication and relationship building. And I am also going to say, I totally understand that these are not that easy to do, otherwise you would have done it already. So absolute grace, compassion and kindness with yourself, and recognize you make these changes at the time when you're ready ready to, which is usually when people come to see me because they're ready. Yay! It is the beauty of my job that I actually get to help people to make those changes. But what supports you to make those changes is, and the reason why therapy can be really helpful only at a time when you're ready to receive it, is you are doing it in a place that feels, and what's key here, feels safe. Feels safe, that you feel safe to come to terms with, come face to face with your inner world. And this is why some people need to go and see somebody for some support to actually start connecting with themselves again, because it feels far too scary for them to do that on their own. So finding somebody, it doesn't matter. It could be a psychotherapist, it could be a breathwork practitioner, it could be a Reiki practitioner. It doesn't matter who it is. But the key is, because me saying to you, this is a safe place, is not enough. It's not enough to feel safe. It's about an internal sense of, I trust this person to be able to help guide me, support me in coming face to face with some of those things that I know are getting in the way of me being connected to myself, and therefore connected to other people, and therefore connected to my life, and therefore building this beautiful life that actually I really want for myself and I really, really deserve. So yeah, just real kind of, absolute compassion that this stuff is not easy. This is really, really hard for people to do.
Love that, and hear all of that. And, I just love, from your perspective, that whole thing of find the person who resonates with you, find the person who's going to help you feel safe, whatever that thing or person looks like. And through my own process of therapy and healing, that's been so many different people at different times and different therapies at different times, and it's just right now, this is a thing working for me now. And I know because my relationships are getting easier and I can communicate better. And that thing that used to trigger me doesn't anymore. And I can sit with it. There's another brilliant quote, which is misquoted. It's supposed to be Viktor Frankl, but there's somebody else who paraphrased it. Let's see if I can remember it. But between stimulus and response there's a space. In that space there's a choice. And in that choice lies your growth and your freedom. I just love it so much, because until I'd started healing, I was walking around thinking I was doing fairly well. And for all wants and purposes, anyone who met me would think I was too, because I've done so well at building the persona, and the projection and the outer world. But I was constantly being triggered and just being reactive. I didn't even know I was, didn't even know that that's what was happening. But as I started to heal and started to self-reflect and hold space in myself, I'd be able to catch that trigger. And instead of being reactive, I'd be able to hold it and go, that annoyed me. What was that about? And I'd be able to just hold that and journal into it later on and be like, what was it? What was it about that comment that upset me? And I'd love your perspective on triggers, because I know you don't call them triggers. So I think it's really good, your wording around that. There's a quote somewhere that says, be aware of your triggers because they're showing you where you're not free. And for me, a lot of the time when I'm upset in that way, and I feel it somatically in my body, it's something in my own woundings that I need to attend to. Nothing to do with that person. They might be being really brash or really whatever, or offensive, whatever it is, but really it's about what that activated in me and how I can heal and attend to it, and what that's telling me about those bits where I'm disconnected. I guess a trigger is a disconnection. What do you think about triggers?
Yeah, so you mentioned, so do you know what? And and I know she's signed up to this, so at some point I think she's going to be watching it. But the reason why I kind of don't always call them triggers, or I do still use the word triggers, but I also call them activations, is because the word trigger triggered my client, basically. And this is a dance actually within psychotherapy. It's almost this gentle challenge, this gentle kind of in a safe place, confronting their fears. Because obviously I don't want her to avoid the word triggers forever. And we do talk about it. And it's funny, actually, we had a little bit of a laugh the other day. Oh my God, I liked a post of yours and it had the word triggers in it. Who am I? But this is a really good example about something that triggered her, the word trigger, go figure, that no longer does in the same way because of the work that she's done, which kind of is alluding to exactly what it is that we're talking about here. So triggers, activations, whatever we call them, essentially it is something in your environment that has led to a response in your body, emotionally, physiologically, and it is absolutely likely not about what it is that just happened there. It's about something likely in the past that has happened, that is, there's something about this situation that is reminding you of it in some way. And the thing is, these triggers are fast, so we call it neuroception. You know, it's the part whereby essentially your body is reacting before your mind has had chance to even pick up on what's happening. So there's something about what is going on in that environment, something that somebody said, something that has happened that has triggered a reaction within your body, that if that experience is not so obviously, for example, speeding car comes around the corner, naturally your body is going to fill with energy to make sure that you step back so you don't get hit by the car, right? That's not a trigger. That's like safety. That's like, you know, keeping yourself safe as a human being. That's not a trigger. A trigger is somebody saying something to you, and it's quite clear that their intention is one thing, but yet you interpret it as something different. So let me try and think of a really good example of it in relation to maybe some of the things that we're talking about. Okay, so a teacher comes and speaks to a parent about, can I have a word with you about your child? And then so straight away, maybe that parent has had a really difficult day, you know, it's on their, you know, they're absolutely knackered, doing all of the things. And then so straight away they hear, oh my God, something is wrong. Might not be, could be something totally innocent about what has happened that day, but straight away this parent is already kind of maybe dysregulated anyway. But there's something about being told that we're about to have a conversation about if we're not kind of regulated, what we start to think danger, because we've got this propensity to want to protect our child. And I think this is often where sometimes, not always, friction can occur between parents and educators, because sometimes parents immediately can interpret things as being dangerous, or there's something wrong, or I need to go into protection mode. If we are not careful about understanding, okay, what am I seeing rather than what I'm thinking I'm seeing? And I think that's the key here. What is actually going on versus what has my neuroception, my body, my Brit picked up on is going on here, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And I think that's a really good example and really useful, because that must happen, I don't know how many times a day, a week, a month in schools without us really noticing it. And it's all just about awareness, really, isn't it? My therapist always says that the first thing is to just become aware. So now we're aware that's a potential pattern, trigger, thing that can happen. We can then create that gap between stimulus and response and take a step back. I wanted to link in, and then we'll segue into thinking about what some of those really rich ways we can communicate and assume good intention. That comes from a head teacher I work with in Switzerland, and he started every staff meeting with, and let's just remember to assume good intention. And I thought that was so beautiful when we're all stressed, got different needs, wants, different things going on, and it just grounded us in this space of, yeah, everyone's here trying to do the best they can with what they have. And let's not, create an argument out of this. Let's try and help one another. But I wanted to link it to one of my favorite books. So I'm just going to plant a question before I say this, because it's come up in a coaching session I was in on Monday, and then it came up in Learning Pioneers Masterminds, and I'm going to plant it as a seed in this. So if you were to pick 3 books that every single human adult had to read, and not just read, embody, learn, live, and breathe, and incorporate into their behaviors, what would they be? So I actually know what my top 3 are, but one of them is The 4 Agreements. Have you read it, Laura?
Do you know what? I bought it after you read. I haven't read it yet. No, I haven't, but I've got it.
Yeah, It's on the shelf and ready to read. Well, when you read it, let's
It's on
send
the
some
shelf.
voice notes because you're going to love it. So basically just the thinking behind the book. It's a Toltec wisdom book. And it talks about 4 ways we can basically show up as our best selves. And the wording within it is so, this is why, like, if everyone read it and embodied it, you'd be sorted, you know. There's like just like it's one of those books I've just underlined nearly every single line. And so these are the 4 agreements. Always do your best. Something I'm quite good at because I've tended to be a people pleaser and overachiever. So that one's no problem for me. I can remember 2 of the others. The 4th one's escaped my mind. But one is don't make assumptions. That's so hard. So what you're describing there is an assumption, you know, and that's one I find challenging. So I'm always trying to pull myself back to, am I making any assumptions? And then inevitably I make some assumptions, realize it's a totally different thing, and then I have a good laugh at myself. But at least I realize it's because I made an assumption. And another one's don't take things personally. Another thing I find really hard, you know, so again, and that's somewhere where relationships break down, is if we're making assumptions without asking questions and getting curious and building communication. And if we're taking things personally based on prior experience and kind of dysregulation, you know, so working with those 2 things can make a real difference to just coming at a conversation from a place of assuming good intention. But I'm just wondering whether it'd be worth segueing into, if people have books that they think would be amazing for people to read, put them in the chat, because I'm an avid reader and I would love to see what you've got to say. But communication. So some little communication tips. So we've talked a lot about our own responsibility for our self-work and reflection and introspection and how we're showing up. So a coach we've worked with is called James Adu. And he says, what's it like to be the other side of you? So do we know the answer to that question? Truthfully, honestly, deeply. You can only really do that through introspection and therapy. Otherwise, it's a bit of a guesswork. And normally, light and shadow, in some ways, you're going to be a beautiful, brilliant person to be the other side of. Sometimes you're not, and you don't even know about it yet. So it's worth digging into that to kind of, you know, come into that wholeness. But then let's segue into that parent-teacher relationship and how we can build from a place of self-compassion, compassion for other, so that we can empathize, collaborate, come together, and not kind of end up in this kind of situation where sometimes people can be on the back foot or feel misunderstood or feel judged. So any tips on communication?
Yeah, and this is the thing, isn't it? And this is why it's actually quite a complex skill, effective communication, because essentially what has to occur is, so, you know, let's say there's 2 of us in this dynamic, say parent teacher. So each person has to take personal responsibility for their stuff, introspection. What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What is my intention? What am I hoping to gain from here? To take responsibility for that, and then their communication. Okay. So like you've said before, I talk about this. What is a perfect communication? You know, if everybody communicated in this way, you know, the world would be a much nicer place. It's about respect, mutual respect for self, my thoughts, my feelings, my needs, my intention matters. And also I respect you, your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, your intentions, and I am willing to listen. And this is what's really hard, because that has to go on individually. Plus then there's the dynamic. So this person takes responsibility for everything going on for them. They say whatever it is that they need to say. Then there's a reaction in this person that they've then got to hold, to process, to then consider whatever their response is, and vice versa. This is an incredibly complex process. But you know what? And I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm segueing here. But if we could, knowing our children are like absolute sponges and they remember everything and they pick everything up, and I don't even know what the children, if they learn a language at a certain age, they can become like multilingual, like because they just learn super quickly. I can't remember what the age is. But what I'm saying is, the sooner that we teach these skills to children, the sooner they're going to be able to grow into adults that are able to do this incredibly complex skill. The problem is now as adults, we're now kind of learning it. We're learning it. We can model this to our children. But I suppose some really, really quick tips is active listening. Okay, so somebody is going to be saying something to you, and we know we might be activated by that, we might be triggered by that based on whatever it is that they're saying. The idea is to still listen whilst paying attention to that. That is like, can you remember the first time you learned to drive a car and you had to, oh my God, I've got to steer, I've got to look in my mirrors, I've got to change gears at the same time. How the hell am I going to do all of that all at one time? And we go, it's impossible, I'm never going to be able to do it. And then we do. It's the same with that process of attending to the conversation whilst also attending to what's going on within yourself. It's a skill. It's a complex one at that. But the key is active listening and then recognizing, you were talking about that space between stimulus and responses, that space. It's recognizing you do not need to respond right away. Because if you do, is often it's a reaction rather than a response. It's a kind of, this is a learned reaction based on how I've responded to situations like this in the past. So it's being able to take that space and actually sometimes say, I'm just going to go away and have a bit of a think about that. Or I'm just going to repeat back to you what you have just said, because then that gives you time to be able to process what has just happened. It's also making sure, recognizing, am I in an environment where I feel safe to have this conversation? Because believe me, I have seen some of these really difficult conversations happening at pickup time, surrounded by other parents. And of course, parents are going to get their back up because they feel judged because they're surrounded by other parents. So it's also intentionally having those conversations at times when both parties feel safe to be able to have that in the way that feels good for them. So just a couple of little tips there.
Yeah, love those. So it's kind of about finding that safe space to have that conversation and where it's what's appropriate to say on the door. Generally something positive and kind of something great that's been going on that day, and what's appropriate just to make time for in another space. And then I loved what you were sharing about the kind of, it was a great metaphor with driving a car. And I was thinking, here in the UK, yeah, you've got the gear stick, but rest of the world, most people don't have gear sticks.
Oh my God, have we gone totally automatic now? Wow.
Most places, but I think that's a sad thing. That I'm not for that at all. How do you change from like second to fourth or like second to fifth or whatever you want to do in an automatic? I'm not for that. Anyway, back to your metaphor. I was thinking as well, because Craig Parkinson's was in the chat. I don't know if you're still there, Craig, and I want to pick up on your point in a minute that you made, that your question you shared in the chat. But both Craig and I kind of work with learning to learn, how to be an effective lifelong learner. And one aspect of that would be metacognition. So being aware of your learning process as you're kind of learning, what's kind of going on, what's going on for me within this. So what you're inviting us into is like, I talk about meta heart and meta soul too. And I don't really know what I mean by that, but it's like meta body. It's like, I'm aware of what's going on inside me whilst I'm having this conversation with this person. I'm also aware of the kinds of things that have historically upset me. And I'm holding that for myself because it's okay, and so Craig's written in the chat, are people looking for self-compassion or self-soothing? And I'm so curious about what your thinking is behind that, Craig, because sometimes both, and what you're sharing there, like the self-soothing aspect, that's so important for us to learn to hold space for ourselves and self-soothe. And we can, I'm thinking of I know you use this a lot in your therapy too, Laura, the drama and empowerment triangles. Like, so in terms of like self-soothing, sometimes we get stuck in kind of victimhood and victim mentality, which is in the drama triangle, right? So victim, perpetrator, rescuer. and then you can flip that and become empowered and have the empowered version of that. So I guess, within that awareness, if you're kind of aware of when you can kind of flip into victim, so kind of like shrink small, or when you can flip into kind of like making sure your voice is heard and getting really like having your back up, or trying to rescue a situation, you can hold all of that at once. I was going to add some ideas from a teacher's perspective too, and some things that we'd shared with our coaches. So I mentioned James Aidoo before. He's on LinkedIn if anyone wants to find him. AIDOO. Brilliant coach, brilliant coach. And he talks about, and this is gold. This has worked for me in so many parent-teacher meetings, especially when it's going to be something quite challenging. He talks about naming the intention. So if you go into one of those challenging conversations, everybody wants to come to a shared solution. Everyone's there to help the child. I hope they are. I've figured that's, probably why we're meeting, so then name that, make it really clear. I want the best for your child, and I want to come to a place where your child feels safe and that we can come to this from a restorative perspective. Who's going to argue with that? I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help. I'm here for us to work together. And that then dissolves those assumptions we can make. A bit like you were sharing before, Laura, when it was like, okay, well, I need to defend my child. It dissolves some of that a little bit and brings us together. And the other little phrase, I've got two more ideas. One phrase that I learned from Nonviolent Communication. So that's one of my second books. I think the whole of humanity should read. Brilliant. Have you read that one, Laura?
I've not, no. I'm not doing well here, am I?
We need a book exchange.
We do.
The background of Nonviolent Communication, it was written by a guy called Marshall Rosenberg, and he used to go into war zones and help the two sides that are at war make peace and communicate together. What a guy. Like, oh my God, what a guy. And so nonviolent communication, you can use nonviolent communication in schools, but nonviolent communication is a way of communicating nonviolently. So it's about building compassion and empathy. And so he talks about a little bit like you were sharing just now, Laura, like that we've got all of our kind of perspective and everything we come with, and when we're trying to communicate with somebody else who's got their background and perspective, and we think we said one thing and they've listened and they've heard something completely different because they're in a different position. So just the phrase, what I'm hearing is such a beautiful way to build understanding. I use that all the time, and I've used it in parent teacher child consultations when we're all together in that meeting, when in this instance I'm thinking of, the parents were speaking over their child and kind of ruling the conversation just because they just had a lot to say, but it meant that the child wasn't able to share, and they shared something and I think they were cut over the top of, and then I was able to say, oh, what I was hearing was, and I could lift that back up so that it really had the value that it kind of deserved in that conversation. But it is a way of showing you're actively listening to, and it means that if there's miscommunication in there, it will get cleared out through that just simple little sentence. So I've got one more idea, but have you got anything you want to share in response to that?
I was literally just gonna say that, and I think the key is you can't reflect back what you're hearing unless you're actively listening. And I mean, and also again, compassion and grace, guys. Like, I get it, as educators, as parents, oh my gosh, if you're educators and parents, like the busiest time poor people in the world, like you are really busy. And so I completely understand the idea, and I suppose this is a challenge, within this, of what can get in the way. Being present enough to be active for actively listening and engaged in a conversation is actually really, really hard, because you have 1,000,001 things in the back of your mind that you know that you need to do. And I've been there. I am often there. It is so hard. It can feel like this battle to pull yourself back into that moment, to be in it. It is also a skill that that absolutely all of us can cultivate, but it is a skill. And kind of whilst you're learning and navigating, learning that skill and getting it wrong, as we all do, it's kind of being kind and compassionate and graceful with yourself as you are moving through that. So I just really wanted to say that I love that reflection back, and it's often something that I do within therapy as well. And I'll often say, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to reflect back what I've just heard there. But please, if I've got it wrong, if I've got it wrong, if I've heard it completely incorrectly, do let me know, And what it does is it means that they're obviously also more likely to really, really listen to make sure that you've got the point in exactly the way that. And also it's about sometimes reflecting back what you've heard, but actually what really, really fosters a deeper connection and relationship building is if you reflect back more than exactly what you've heard. So I suppose this is more of a kind of skill that comes with deeper self-reflection, definitely a psychotherapy skill, whereby you're able to actually reflect back what you were hearing that has not actually been shared with words alone, what you were sensing, what you were seeing in front of you. Another kind of layer of that ability to communicate and to connect with the people around us. So yeah, just that, I just wanted to reflect on that. But yeah, an amazing point, Becky.
Yeah, there was something you were saying there, and I was like, oh, I know what it was. So, so you were kind of talking about kind of those words and those ways that we can say, what you shared it in a different way, but what I'm hearing is, or this is what I hear you sharing. And then I was also thinking what you were sharing about that kind of the feeling that you're getting and lifting up the unsaid words. And what you do so well is you're really good at reflecting back people's light. And I was thinking that, you were saying about us being mirrors for one another. How much are we telling people what we appreciate about them, what we see in them that they maybe don't fully see ourselves? Because I'm sure people listening, joining in, you, Laura, me, when I've had people share something back, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't fully see that in myself. And then you become more of that thing. So what if instead of being in a vicious cycle, we could all be in a virtuous cycle together? And that's something we can do with everyone. It's something we can do with children. It's something we can do with colleagues. It's something we can do with friends, with family, with parents. Just take a moment to tell people what you appreciate about them and what you see in them. And that only amplifies, and it just takes a second. And who doesn't appreciate being appreciated?
And one of my favorite sayings is, and I love that, honestly, we like, everybody watching me totally fangirl each other. This is what we do all the time, just share how much we love and appreciate each other all the time. The light in me sees the light in you. So being able to kind of reflect on something that you see in that person that you just think is so beautiful, that you admire so much, it's often also something, we've talked about this, something that you also either have within yourself or you have this desire to kind of connect to that part of yourself in a way that you maybe haven't already. But just that reflecting back of that not only makes that other person feel, it makes them feel seen, right? And going back to, and this is why, we know we're going to keep linking back to things, aren't we? Linking back to something we were mentioning earlier about disconnection. People feel disconnected because they don't feel seen. And I tell you what, every single person that walks through my therapy door, virtual or physical, every single person in this world, wow, do they just want to be seen for who they are and actually valued and kind of have that I see you, and you are good enough, worthy enough, lovable enough, just as you are in your entirety, warts and all. And there's something just so beautiful about saying something genuinely, not because you want to blow steam up somebody's bum, or not because you want to be a people pleaser, or not just because you're just throwing away these comments but like intentionally. And remember, people feel that presence when you go, wow, oh my God, I love how you do that. People feel that, and that is building connection, that is building relationships.
And that makes me think as well of the therapy I've had. And like, my therapist is amazing. I just totally aligned with her. And when I share things with her, she sometimes says things like, you can just be a bit kinder to yourself, Becky. It's okay, you can be kinder to yourself. And I'm like, oh, thanks. So just hearing those things that are that support that keep you buoyant, make a difference. And I was thinking, like, I always kind of say that children just want to feel seen, heard, and valued. And so do people's inner children, so do adults, so it's like just bearing that in mind. And as well, in schools, we're walking around and teaching with adults with different levels of awareness of self. So there will be different levels of, this is why kind of we get all these kind of problems and clashes, is because some people have done that self-reflective work and are able to see these things, and some people just haven't, because we've never been taught to, and we haven't had it modeled to us. So it's kind of like our generation-ish are the generation that get to learn to do this stuff so that our children are able to do this stuff too. I forgot what I was going to say about that. There was a point at the end of it and it's gone, but it doesn't matter. So segueing on then, so we've kind of focused on that self-work and self-ownership, and some of the benefits of that. We focused a little bit on how to build those relationships and how to come at things from good intention. I'm wondering if we could segue into supporting children. So in the sense of, when we were planning this, we should share this story, Laura, because it was so good. You were telling me a story about Owen, this really, really simple thing of something that had happened. So I'll just kind of set the context. So things can happen. Things happen all the time in schools, at home, everywhere. And children interpret those things differently to how an adult might. And sometimes those things you talk about, and I've heard before talked about trauma with a big T and trauma with a little t. They can cause little traumas, little disconnections from self. But if we spot it and we know how to work with it in the moment, we can stop trauma at the source. And ultimately, that is like a massive win for everyone, and the more we can do that, the more we can be aware of those things, the more we can work with it. And I guess I'm just going to link this a little bit to, because we weren't planning to talk about disconnection, but I'm going to link this a little bit to connection and relationship with self. The more we connect to ourselves, the more empathic we become, because we are aware of the things that have disconnected us. And therefore we are aware that those things can happen with kids too. And we're more likely to sense them. And we're more likely then to know how to handle that situation in the moment. And before that, we're unaware. And so many things could be happening that we don't even realize are affecting children in a way that is a different interpretation to what we'd have on the situation. So should we talk about that story? Because it was a good one. And because you had an example with Owen, that something he might have interpreted as upsetting.
Yes, absolutely. And remember, we're talking here and we're coming together, aren't we? Like educators, parents, at the end of the day, we're human beings. This conversation is relevant to kind of all humans, actually all of us. If we're just human to human, we're recognizing this is there for all of us. So these are things that educators, parents doing this work. You can do this work with children, whether in your care as a teacher or as a parent. So, okay, so let's think about trauma. It might be helpful for me to just kind of talk about so essentially, lots of people come to see me as adults with unprocessed trauma. And I suppose what we're talking about here is how can we catch it at the source to prevent it from becoming trauma? Essentially, challenging experiences, traumatic experiences do not need to be stored as trauma. How can we help our children prevent that from happening? And I'll share my little story. So, Owen, my lovely Owen, he's a very sporty character, was at his cricket presentation evening this summer, just gone. I wasn't there. I'm glad I wasn't there. It would have absolutely broken my heart to have witnessed this, but I heard about it afterwards from my husband. And he was sat there on his mat with all of his friends. They were calling out all of the under sevens to come up to receive a medal for taking part that season. Anyway, one by one, they're all called up, and gradually more and more children go up until Owen is left on his own on the mat. And then they start to, so everybody's a little bit confused because then they start congratulating the under seven. So Owen's confused, gradually getting more and more upset as his friends start rejoining him back on the mat and asking why he's not been called up. So Owen gets upset. He's absolutely heartbroken. In that moment, as the kids are starting to walk back, the coaches start announcing this special award of the player of the season. Essentially, they wanted Owen to feel special, but instead the emotional damage had been done where he didn't feel special, or not in a good way. He felt left out. And he was absolutely heartbroken. And so, of course, bless him, he's walking up. He's too busy sat in his emotional turmoil of feeling isolated, separate from his friends, rather than kind of, whoa, we're amazing, I've just won player of the season. Anyway, that night he came back and he was telling me this story, and it was breaking my little heart. And what I did was I just let him tell me how he was feeling and what the story entailed, and I just let him tell it me in his own words. And I said to him, darling, gosh, that must have been so upsetting. I can really understand how you were feeling. I would have felt exactly the same thing too. Validation. Allowing him to own, to talk about, to process his thoughts, his experience, how he experienced it. That's key here, how he experienced it. We know the coach's intention, the intention was good. The intention was to make him feel special. What ended up happening was he felt isolated, he felt left out. So I let him tell his story. I let him feel his feelings. I let him tell it in his own way, and I validated them. And then I waited until he finished telling his story and he moved on himself to talk about something completely different. So I allowed him to tell the story, to hold emotional space for him at his own pace. The next day he came back and started talking about the story again. But what happened, what I witnessed, was the emotional landscape has changed. The intensity of the emotional experience wasn't there. He'd already started processing it. And I asked him, how are you feeling about it now? And what do you think about what do you think was going on for the coaches? And essentially, I didn't try and fix it. I just asked open questions to help him to consider what was going on around him, whilst also validating his own experience of the situation. Anyway, the next day he didn't mention it again. I allowed him to talk about it at his own pace, in his own way. That is the difference with this experience. It could have been an experience that could have stayed with him forever, and he could have ended up in, somebody like me's therapy room one day talking about this one experience where he felt isolated, versus an experience that has helped him to learn, to grow, to build resilience, because these experiences are going to happen all the time. But as parents and educators, if we are there able to pick up on and give space for them to talk about their very, very real, there's no wrong feelings, very, very real experience, thoughts, feelings, whatever it is that's going on for them, at the time when they're ready to talk about it, which is often not the time when we're ready for them to talk about it. So we can often, with our kids, is start to go, tell me about that. They're not ready. It has to be on their terms. And the key is walking alongside them. And all we've got to do is allow them to tell it and validate it. They'll do the work by themselves. We as human beings have the ability to process trauma naturally. We just have to allow space for feeling feelings and reflection. And that's how we stop trauma at the source.
Oh, so well described in a nutshell. There's so much I'd like to pick out from that and then link it to the story that I then followed up with. But that kind of, so first of all, I'm going to work backwards a little bit. You were kind of saying allowing children to share that when the moment kind of feels right. And it's so interesting, like those of us who are teachers and those of us who are listening back or who are part of this now, there's times in the day where that will happen. Coming in from playtime, that's when children like to share. And I used to, this one time, because I'd have my mind on my lesson and the stuff I needed to do, like invalidate those experiences. So I'd be like, we just need to get on, let's look. But then as I learned about processing and how children interpreted things differently, if there was something that was coming in from the playground or something that was obviously of the moment, I would make space to have a circle time or to take a small group of children aside and really listen to them and do like a restorative practice style conversation. And that always built trust. It sorted the situation out in the moment. It meant that children felt seen, heard, and valued, and the whatever the niggle or argument or thing was got seen to in that moment and prioritized. It's like, this is important. If it's important to you, it's important to me. So that kind of validation and then those moments, and it made me think then, Laura, that must be part of the reason why things will happen in school and kids won't share that with their teachers or with adults because they're busy playing and learning and doing, and then they go home and then they say, oh yeah, this thing happened, and it comes out at home like you were describing. So there's something there about empathy and understanding as well around trying to, because you had empathy there. You saw the intention behind, it was the cricket teachers, wasn't it?
Yeah,
teachers behind what they were doing. And what could have happened in defensive mode is that you could have gone, how dare you do that? You did that all wrong. You singled out my son. You could have gone in all guns blazing and saying, I want a meeting with the head teacher. And, and that's not building connection and empathy. So,
and I just want to say, again, just to really validate, because I'm not Mother Earth over, I'm not, I had that internally, but I witnessed it. I had all of that. Oh my God, they got it wrong. They should have done it like this, but that was inside of me. I didn't do anything with it. I mean, I ranted a little bit to my husband because that's kind of his job. Hey, James, if you're watching this back. Yeah, but it's about recognizing that I'm a human being and my brain and my body has hardwired me to protect my child like a, mother bear. So yeah, absolutely all of that was going on in me. And remember, between stimulus and response, there is a space. So I suppose the reason why I just wanted to say that is doing this work doesn't mean that you go all, I'm all zen and nothing affects me. It's just that you choose to recognize what's mine. And actually, what do I need to kind of just have space to kind of settle the natural emotions that have come up for me before then deciding how I react to this? And sometimes the reaction is nothing at all. So obviously I didn't address it with them at all because there was no need. The need was for me to look after my son's emotional needs at the time. It was not helpful or going to we weren't going to get anywhere by me having that conversation. But I think that is a difference with somebody that's maybe done that work versus somebody that hasn't. But it doesn't mean that we don't feel and we don't get that defensiveness. It just is something that goes on inside us and we witness it and decide what we're going to do with it.
Thank you, Laura, for making that bit visible. That's really important. I have kind of two angles that I wanted to share with that. The angle that we shared when we talked about this story, and also just very, very gently for anyone who's listening, very gently and kindly to yourself, what things might have happened in your own childhood that could have caused you to believe things about yourself that aren't true or disconnect you from you. So and again, well-intentioned adults not realizing how things could be interpreted. I have a memory of being in primary school and we were singing for the choir and the choir teacher had asked us all to sing to this song. And she was walking along the rows and listening. And if you got to be in the choir, you got to stand up. And if you were out of tune and you couldn't sing, you were tapped on the head and asked to sit down. Well, I was tapped on the head. So part of what I interpreted for myself was my voice doesn't matter. I started to believe that my voice didn't matter and that I can't sing. And that's probably slightly true, but it's fine. I sing anyway. It brings me joy, mostly in a room by myself, But, that's just a tiny little thing, like trauma with a little T that stuck in me and got lodged in me. And then I interpreted that as I am less than. I'm not good enough for this. And it was the way I interpreted it. The teacher didn't intend for that to happen. But there is something there about singling children out and how we do that because both of those stories involve in different ways singling children out, and we don't like that. So so then the flip of that I was going to share was when you shared that story, and you said as you were sharing it, you were like, it's not that big a thing, and in a sense it isn't, and it isn't at the same time. But it just so happened that I just had a therapy session exploring moments in my childhood where I had felt, it wasn't that story I just shared, but where I'd felt singled out or less than, or like I didn't belong, and how that had affected me and played out. So it's almost like a fractal pattern. It happens in a moment, and then something else happens in childhood that then backs up the original story, and then it happens again and again and again until it becomes this unconscious story that actually self-perpetuates and holds you back. I just thought it was fascinating that you shared your thing from this moment in time with your son, and I was like, yeah, but I've had all these other little incidences, and they've affected me for my entire life, so they do matter. The little things do matter.
Yeah, and I suppose it's that, we are, when we're growing up, our belief system is forming, and children don't kind of go, obviously, and as an adult, we've got this sense of, I don't feel good enough, I don't feel lovable enough, and we feel it, we feel the wounds. As children, they're actually quite like, oh, okay, well, I'm clearly not good enough. They're quite almost like matter of fact with it, really, because they're just kind of like trying to learn, well, what's my place in the world, and how do I fit, and what's the right thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do. They're innately, they want to please, they essentially want to get their needs met for love, connection, all of the things that we're talking about here. And the thing is, and I really, really want to stress this, because I'm always really, really conscious when I share some of these things. So many parents are so afraid of, because we know so much now, they're afraid of saying the wrong things. They're essentially afraid of effing their children up. That the amount of times that I have parents come into there and they say, I'm just really worried, I'm screwing my child up. I've already done it. I'm doing a terrible job. And oh my God, and I can't say that. And I read this thing on Instagram, and I'm just, that's it. I'm just making an absolute mess of it. What we're saying here is none of us can get it perfectly. One, because we're not in our child's brain and we have no idea what they are thinking, feeling, interpreting from events. We've got no idea. But the more present we are, and remember, this is a skill that we have to cultivate ourselves. It's not enough to just go, I'm just going to be present enough with my child to deal with their stuff. It doesn't work like that. We have to do the work ourselves to be able to do this with our children. The more you cultivate that presence, that self-awareness, you are going to be able to pick up on that. So, Becky, you mentioned that, you had a number of different experiences that led into this belief that you're not good enough, or that your voice didn't matter. With a present parent or educator, you'd be able to see a child start to withdraw into themselves. You'd be able to pick up on that and inquire gently about what's going on with those beautiful open questions, allowing them to know it is safe for them to talk about or open up about their experience. And this is how we can prevent these little experiences becoming a huge negative core belief system that this child then continues to carry for the rest of their life. We all have the power to do this. And I always say to every parent that I work with, you cannot get this perfect. It's impossible. I'm not going to get it perfect. I know all of these things because I'm not in Owen's head. I've got no idea what he's picking up from what I'm doing. I'm just kind of doing my best here, winging it, as we all are. But the best that we can hope for is that we create this relationship. Again, we're coming back to relationships and connection, this relationship with our child, with our children, with the children in our care, where they feel safe to come and speak to us about things. So, for me, I want to create a relationship with Owen whereby when he gets to, 18 plus, whatever, I have no idea, and he goes, oh, Mum, when you used to do this, it really annoyed me, or, and then I can go, oh God, you're joking, mate, like, this is why I was doing it. And we can explain the intention, and it's about then that repair. And then they go, right, okay. And that helps them to process it at that time. That's the best that we can hope for. We can't get this perfectly, but we can create a relationship where our children feel safe to come to us and speak to us about anything when they are ready to come and speak to us about it. And that's how we continuously support them to process whatever they've picked up as trauma, let's call it.
Yeah, love all of that. And I love how you're bringing it back to presence, and presence with ourselves, and then presence with those around us. So there's an invitation there to think about, how do you know you're present? You know, what does it feel like when you're present? What kind of things help you to feel present and, you know, get into that state of flow? And what kind of things do you love doing with your children that get into that state of flow alongside them? And then I was also thinking about support networks. So earlier on in the conversation, you were talking about you know, if you are wanting to be more introspective and work on yourself and untie some of those knots and kind of find some of those patterns and kind of, you were talking about kind of facing yourself and digging into that stuff. It was all about finding a person you could trust and connect with. And one point I wanted to pick up from that was, it's about then having that network around you of people who can also support you in that. So, you know, for me, in the process of my own healing, friendships like your friendship have been instrumental to that, because people are there to hold that. They understand where you're coming from. You can have those open and honest conversations. People you can be vulnerable with, and will come at what you're doing with curiosity and will work with you on that. Is definitely something to really think of. Who in my support network could be somebody I could lean into? Because we're not taught to ask for help. That's another thing. You know, if I ask for help, it means I'm not strong enough and I'm not coping. So I won't be doing that. You know, but actually, James Adu again, I hope James's ears are ringing and he's sensing this. But, you know, he says, what does help look like to you? What a brilliant question. You know, and how often do we reflect on that for ourselves, especially when we're in a situation where we're like, do you know what, actually, I'm finding it quite hard to cope right now. I could do with some help. You know, who do we reach out to and say, could you just be there for me? Can you check in with me? Can we meet up a few more times more regularly? Or for me and you, can we just voice note each other all the time? Not that either of us asked, we just did it. But like whatever's supportive, you know, in that sense, because as you start to dig into those parts of yourself, and you start to cultivate more presence within yourself, you know, it's an up and down journey. It's nice to have people around that are going to be like, you've got this, keep going, you're doing good. Yeah. So just that kind of support network is part of that. I also wanted to pick up on something Job Christensen shared and brought to my attention when we had a Zoom once, which was just so lovely. When I was in Bali, we're opposite sides of the world. Job is in the States. And he was talking about conflict resolution, as in basically when you have an argument, and how often that's kept behind closed doors. So definitely in my own childhood, well, it wasn't kept behind closed doors, but it was never resolved in front of me, you know, so there was never that, you know, so what does it look like to model or hold good conflict resolution with children? Because by and large, I would guess that is kept behind closed doors, both in the classroom and at home. And that's actually not true life. We have arguments all the time or kind of conflict points. And it could actually be quite useful to see what that looks like so it doesn't feel scary. So I wonder what your perspective was on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of parents think that actually, it's I don't want my children to see us argue. But yet, how are they going to see what a normal relationship, including conflict resolution, is without actually seeing that? And, you know, I'm going to be honest. So Owen has seen me and his dad bicker, and he's asked questions about that. And he sort of said, you know, why are you arguing? I mean, I'm quite a passionate, as you can tell everybody, I'm passionate. So sometimes I'm loud and we're not arguing. It's just me getting really, really passionate about what I'm talking about. But then he'll say, why are you shouting? And I'm like, I'm just really passionate about what I'm talking about. But it's about encouraging normal life. And the thing is often children can sense if there's something wrong, because what will happen is if you're a bit annoyed with your other half, or if there's some tension between teachers at school, they are so perceptive, because actually remember that it's before they've been told that you're not meant to listen to your intuition. So they pick up on these things. They pick up on the energy shift. They pick up on mum and dad aren't looking at each other, that they're being a bit short with each other, that they're being passive aggressive, they're saying one thing but then doing something else with their action, and that's confusing to them. It's confusing. So we are much better to have these sort of conversations in front of them. Absolutely, we're not going to have full-blown raging arguments. If we're having that, then we've probably got another issue that maybe needs addressing. And also recognizing that is also part of the work that we've got to do as well, outside of kind of our relationship with our children. You know, is there some things that we need to work on within our relationship? But actually your day-to-day conflict resolution, little bickers, absolutely, let them see it. Let them see what it is like to be in a functioning normal relationship. And actually bickering is part of that. Disagreements is part of it. Let them see you disagree. And then actually, how do you deal with that? How do you repair that? How do you come back through that? Let them see you being affectionate and loving to each other. Let them experience what it means to be human and the differences and nuances in relationships, because they are literally learning to be humans and create relationships, sustain relationships, manage different relationship dynamics through us. And part of that 100% is how to deal with when things don't go right. And you know, what we often find as adults is people are so avoidant of conflict. They don't want to say, I don't want to say that to that person because I'm worried about how they're going to react or how they're going to deal with that. And I don't want them to not like me, and I don't want them to not be my friend anymore. I don't want them to. And that's because we have never been able to see that it is completely possible for you to have a disagreement with somebody and come through the other side. And you know what? We often talk about this within therapy. If you have a rupture, and I've had this as well within my own friendships, you know, if you've had a rupture and you work on it and you repair it, your relationship becomes stronger as a result of that. Children need to see that.
Yeah. Because otherwise, then you just lifelong sweep things under the carpet and avoid them. You know, and I think as well, just kind of on that, because that's definitely been part of my own healing, is speaking truth, speaking what's true for me. And for me, what really helped, and that was absolutely debilitating for me to begin with, because it wasn't safe to speak my truth. I had to really learn to do it. And the way I learned to do that was doing it with safe people who I knew could hold it and would appreciate it. You're one of them, Laura. You know, it's like when I speak my truth and when I share something, and something Juan and I, so Juan's my husband, something we'll share if we're in kind of we call it shadow grapple, because it's shadow meets shadow. It's like you're wounding meeting wounding. When we're in that together, we sometimes say in those conversations, this might come out a bit clumsily, but it means we say the thing. You know, so it's a way of like the other person then knows, okay, I'm going to hold this and try my very best to understand where they're coming from, because it's really important for me for my partner to speak their truth, you know, and it might hurt a little bit, but I'm going to hold it.
Yeah.
And the way Juan and I come at, we've taken many years to get to this. But we try our best to come at arguments, shadow grapple with, what is it within my own wounding that I've brought to this conversation? So instead of projecting, he's doing this again, that's happening again, da, 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 da. Instead of doing that, me being like, okay, we're in this pattern. What is it in my own wounding that's creating this dynamic again? And how can I attend to and heal that? So the way that tends to play out is we'll have our kind of shadow grapple argument. We'll need space, and we'll create space and honor and respect that space. And when we come back together, the conversation is about, this is what I think I was bringing. And for him, this is what I think I was bringing, and I'm sorry. And does that sound about right? Would you like to add to it? So it doesn't come about pointing fingers and blame, taking full ownership for, I played a part in this, and I know where this might be coming from. And then that kind of level of compassion and forgiveness, where we know that we're learning to heal and grow together. and that's
Yeah.
strong. Doing that over many years makes our, like you were saying, conflict resolution. When you build, when you work through a conflict with somebody, your relationship gets stronger. Well, what if you do that again and again and again and again and again and again and again? It's really powerful, you know. So yeah, just a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the ways that, so again, something that I've learned is, so as we know, as women, we're cyclical. So I will often, if I know that I am, you know, I'm dysregulated, I'm in survival mode, I'm literally, I've got nothing left to give energy wise, I am at my limit of my window of tolerance. I will often say to him, I'm, you know, I have, if I snap, it is nothing to do with you. It is not, it is all me, believe me right now, because I am just in. And do you know what? That is a beauty, actually, the beauty and the magic of a, you know, long-term partnership and marriage. You know, it's a relationship like no other. And it's so important to model this to our kids, that, you know, you can be your rawest, authentic self and own that, you know, owning who you are, all of yourself, warts and all, because let's be honest, and you know, I've got my saying, we're all at least 10% dickhead. You know, that, and to have somebody witness that and still love you completely, even though they have seen you at your best and your worst, is a beautiful thing. God, model that to your kids. Model the beauty of that relationship. And that's ownership. That's not saying I'm going to walk around being all like, you know, I'm super healed and we're all working on our stuff all of the time. And we are not going to show up as our best selves all of the time. And sometimes we're going to engage in some shady behavior, but we can do it consciously, and we can kind of let them in on that and just own whenever we almost know I'm engaging in some not great behavior. I'm not at my best. I'm not the best communicator right now, and I'm just going to own it. And I just need you to be okay with that, because I've got nothing left to give. And it's also knowing that you are able to do that, and the beauty of the depth of a connection that knows you at your core and loves you, warts and all, is you can do that.
Love all of that, Laura. And I'm just noticing the time, and we've got 10 more minutes. So I thought we could start to wrap up with some final thoughts. And so one thing I wanted to lift up and come back to before I kind of go into a kind of final question, you were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the kind of, you know, the safety and basic needs, and then the kind of love and belonging, kind of being on the next kind of thing as you work your way up. And as you were saying that, I was like, well, what if not? It's my favorite thinking routine. Thinking routines come from a Project Zero, and lots of educators use them to help shape thinking in the classroom. So what if not, one of my favorites, because it's basically, what if we did the opposite too? And what if we completely disrupted the way we were thinking about things? So I know that, you know, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so it's kind of a thing. But what if belonging and love became the baseline of everything? You know, what if love was the baseline frequency of the universe? I've written an article, blog post about that, and about how I would attend to the learning and the children in my classroom from a place of love. You know, so, you know, same thing with everything. What if everything was just imbued with love, which creates belonging, creates connection? And that was where we started from. So that's my little what if. But, you know, the invitation for this last kind of 8 minutes or so is, you know, what would this look like? So wrapping up our conversation, if adults gently, lovingly, compassionately started to take ownership for their own behavior, the way they showed up, started to get curious about themselves and their inner worlds. What if every adult did that? And what if every adult focused on building a relationship from a place of assuming good intention and building those relationships intentionally? And what if children witnessed this happening, and we enabled them to attend to those moments in the moment, and reflect and be curious about and build relationships over time? What would that look like, Laura?
I mean, it would just it would change the world. It would change the game of life for everybody. So, and I often come back to this. So parents and educators are the people that spend the most time with and have the most influence over children. We know children are like sponges. They're learning how to be human by watching us and by kind of witnessing what's going on around with those main people they're spending time with. They create their belief system based on that. They learn how to look after themselves, emotionally regulate, communicate through that. These are our next generation of therapists, servicemen, leaders. They are the next generation of people that are going to make our world go round. So it would change the world because they are going to witness a different world. And I always say the pattern stops with us. The pattern stops there because you create a different blueprint. You create a different world for our kids. So absolutely, it has to start with parents and education. It has to, because we have the greatest influence over the young people that are going to be so influential in how our world is going to look in the future.
100%. And imagine a world that didn't play out wounding, that instead played out healing. And that makes me think of in the many banters we've had in voice notes and in LinkedIn threads and everywhere, a while ago now, it must have been about 6 months ago. I can't remember what I'd shared. I'd shared a post on LinkedIn and you put a really great comment and you said, heal people, and hurt people. And I was like, I sat with it. We've talked about this since, but I was like, yes, and. I was like, yes, but it's incomplete. And I couldn't, it was sitting with it. I was like, I'm not quite sure why. And it's because we're all in a process of healing. So I couldn't possibly claim to be a healed person ever. I'm never going to do that. So I'm going to unwittingly spread healing and pain at the same time without meaning to. I don't want to spread the pain bit. I don't want to do it. But when I play out unconscious behavior, and there are, and people can interpret my behavior in various ways, it's inevitable that I may hurt people. So the antidote to that is becoming so connected to self, so self-integrated, so self-aware that I lessen the chance of playing out the wounding and I heighten the chance of playing out healing and being healing. And I've heard people talk about healers. Healers don't heal other people. Healers are space holders so that people can heal themselves. So, for example, your example with Owen, you were a space holder for him to process his own healing. So you're being a healer, but you wouldn't label it as that. You were just brilliant at holding space. So what if we learn to hold space for ourselves and hold space for others in that way and come as much as possible from a healed place, heal people. And then when we're hurting one another, we can communicate about it. It's fine. We can bring it up and say, do you know what? When you said that thing, that didn't land so nicely because of this, that, and the other. Did you realize that that's what was happening? And the other person isn't going to get their back up because they're going to know that's a learning point and a connection point.
Yeah, I love that. And then just one final thing I want to say about the hurting thing is it's also recognizing that sometimes, even with good intention, we're going to hurt people. Because, for example, remember, we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our own needs first and foremost. So a really good example is leaving a relationship that isn't working for you. That other person may not want you to leave. You're probably going to hurt them. Does that mean that you've done something wrong by doing that? No. So it's also being okay with when it comes from a place of truth and what is for the greatest good of you and your needs, that you are. But part of, I think, our healing journey is also learning that that's okay, because we have to choose ourselves, and we also want to teach our children to choose themselves first too.
Oh gosh, Laurie, that's a whole other can of worms. We could have a whole other StreamYard about that.
I know, and I'm like, no, we got 2 minutes left.
That's a conversation I've had with people close to me. What does a really empowering breakup look like? Because that can, where would be more triggering and upsetting than breaking up from someone you love and going in different directions? You know, so how might be, if we're really super healed, you could come at that from a place of utter consciousness and reverence and care. Challenging still, really challenging, but doable. You know, so you can hold it, like, we'll have to share this song in the chat, the People of Water one. You can, it's freeing. If you're healed, if you're as much as possible, you are as healed as possible. You will allow yourself your own freedom, and you set other people free too. And freedom is one of my top values. So, you know, yeah, the world would be free.
Amazing, incredible. I can't believe it. We just essentially did a voice note live. How amazing is that?
I mean, Laura's voice notes.
Should we enter and everybody our jumper?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I meant to say at the beginning if anyone noticed anything about our jumpers. But I think, do you know what I think might have happened, Laura? Unless everybody got bored and left, the comments stopped about 3/4 of an hour ago. So I don't know if StreamYard wasn't keeping up with LinkedIn. So we haven't got the interactions in the chat. But we shall show. Are you ready?
We shall show. Are you ready? I've got to stand up, otherwise ready. We should all be in therapy. Mine's wrong way around.
So basically, I think I said this to you, Laura. I don't want to take this off, and now I can take a vow of silence because I've not really got much else to say, to be honest. We could have come onto the StreamYard and just sat here with our jumpers in a kind of, I don't know, not silent protest, silent invitation. Right, let's wrap things up.
Loved it, my darling. Thank you so much for an incredible conversation.
Yeah, really appreciate it, and super looking forward to seeing people's comments after this and the kind of continuation of the conversation, because really we just wanted to share this openly so that others could think and reflect and see where they kind of, you know, where they stand in different points that we've made in the conversation. So super curious to hear what others are saying in the chat in the next couple of days. Thank you, Laura. Go and have an amazing evening.
You too, lovely. Bye.
Bye.